as Master of Ceremonies, and since these are lightning talks, I will keep us moving along. I wanted to go ahead and introduce Rudy, or Raul, right? I can say Raul, I'm sorry, Rudy Flores. And he's the founder of Red Crow Consulting, and he's got extensive experience in consulting in general, and he's also currently starting a startup in Dallas, or running a startup in Dallas. He's going to talk to us a little bit about class-free object orientation in JavaScript.
Okay, hey, thanks for having me. All right. What class-free object-oriented in JavaScript? So I had some old JavaScript I wanted to make into new JavaScript. So I went to my go-to mantra, which is, how do I create the most maintainable code in the world? Kind of extreme, but that's kind of where you got to go. And it seems to be the kind of guiding thing that I was going to as I was trying to redo something that I had, and I intend to reuse it a lot. So anyway, I wanted to do something more than just use some of the new features in ES6 and beyond to redo my code that was already there. And after some searching, I found this. I like to call it the pattern that can. This was suggested by Douglas Crockford in his How JavaScript Works book. It's only a couple of page chapter, but it's phenomenal. I guess he was looking for an approach, like how would it work if you could eliminate the use of this. And this pattern is the key to doing that, and I want to dive into it. I might read at you a little bit for the next 2 slides. It might get a little busy, but then we'll move to some code, a simple example, and see how I'm using it. And maybe you can help me improve how I'm doing the doc or something on it. Anyway, so if you give yourself a minute to look at the JavaScript on the upper left, you'll notice that what's happening here is objects are no longer instantiations of a class, so we won't be using new to create objects, and we won't need to be using this. In this case, each constructor with a little c, is just a function that takes a single object as its parameter, we'll call spec, and it returns a frozen object, right? These frozen objects, right, they have state that can't be damaged or corrupted. So you go about making hard and soft objects by functional composition. And as you can see, as you will see, properties are hidden and the methods are meant to process transactions. An object is said to be hard if it's only returning methods. It's said to be soft if it's returning a data structure, set of container with data in it. And again, if it is a soft object, there's no behavior associated with it, right? So it's not like you're taking some data and adding it to a subclass so you can get some intended behavior. In this world, it's a mix and match kind of world, and you might have some data and you pass it to the methods to get the work done. To do a little more reading, I like the way he put it here. Your constructor can call as many other constructors as you need to get access to the state management or the behavior that they provide. In some cases, you can add some of the methods. In other cases, your new methods will use those acquired methods. Anyway, you're accomplishing a true reuse that's similar to inheritance, but without the tight coupling. So you have the hard objects are defending the properties. So you have a true encapsulation, and I guess that would be polymorphism, right? So anyway, again, let's look a little more closely. Same pattern in the upper right. When you actually use it, over here where let member equals spec, you're doing some, pay attention for that, because when we do the demo, you'll see that we're doing member destructuring assignments, which gives us a ton of benefits around defaulting values when you get undefineds, and then also I'd like anybody's input on how I'm currently documenting and using the spec parameter. Well, let's see. Again, we're returning hard and soft objects. Not all of them need to be hard. And then also one caveat is that if you're using this approach, JSON.stringify will only see an empty object. It'll ignore the methods and the hidden data. So there is a workaround. You have to provide your own toJSON method. With that, let's go to some code. All right, so here's the function, right? We'll break it down in a minute, but in this one is simply, it's simply a counter constructor, right? It's a class-free object constructor. Again, I'm saying constructor with a lowercase c for a simple counter that counts up and down by 1, right? So currently, how I'm doing the JS doc is like this. So I have the single parameter that it takes, and then to do the members, you do spec dot, the name of the parameter, description. And then I'm using this, I think it's from, I think this is the Google JavaScript style guide for objects or something like that. But I'm not sure if it's entirely the right way to go. And I think the way this autocomplete works probably varies by your IDE. And so anyway, let me show you exactly what I mean by that. So here's the counter constructor. It receives spec, right? And inside of spec, it's looking for same named members. So right here, we set a default value to John Doe. But if when I use the constructor, I pass run by and it equals something, then you've effectively passed the parameter. And then I'm also initializing a local variable called counter, setting it to 0, which I'm not expecting to be passed in when you use the constructor by virtue of not including it in the JS doc above, right? And then I'm adding one here, forget to say, I put that in there because one of the benefits of just passing in one object called spec is that you can have your parameters come in any order, and then you can also add them or remove them without breaking your code because the way they're called, you know, doesn't change. You're still passing an object. Let's see here. Here's one. I have a private function in here that says just say hello to the person who's running it based on what was passed in. And then I have an up and a down function, one defined with an arrow function and one the other way. And you'll notice that they're both returning Booleans, right? Okay. And then I'll show you this JSON. In fact, first I will comment out the JSON. Okay. All right. So then in the bottom of the constructor, I'm running a function. You could really do anything, right? I could say up, start to call it here, and I'll see the comment that was above it in the documentation, right? It's truly mix and match, little of this, little of that. And then the constructor is simply returning up, down, and toJSON. You know what, I think I'll leave toJSON in here for now. There. And so that's it. So by returning these members up, down, and toJSON, I'm making those functions the methods, the public methods of the constructor. So then to use it, let me comment this out and just redeclare it. So if I can use const to declare count, and I want to use the counter constructor, right? It's telling me that it needs an object that it's calling spec, that I need run by, and I'll say it's Rudy there, and I'm done, right? So now, then I'll add, if I want to use it, then I could, and I get the autocomplete, right? Or at least in the way that I've documented JS doc, in this particular one, it does work. But I will notice a bug here. I can see the up method, but over here by up, I don't see the function description for up that was inside of the constructor. And I sent that bug to JetBrains, and they agreed that the pop-up documentation should include that. So at some point, it'll work that way. Still, that's pretty good. It's pretty good for me as far as using and refactoring goes. That at least I can see the autocomplete, and I could always bounce back to the constructor if I needed to. Okay, so then I'm going to call up 3 times. I'm going to call down 1 time. Then I'm going to call up and down again while I console log them. Then I'm just going to console log what's in count at that time. Then I'm going to console log the count running the toJSON method, and then I'm going to run JSON stringify on count, and then we'll see what that gives us. So as you can see here, you end up with when you first set this variable, when you first set the object to the counter constructor, you see that say hello that was inside of it got run. So that could be like some kind of initialization or something that you wanted to happen at the time that you were creating it. It kind of condenses a lot of things, at least it did for me. And then here and here with these 2 methods, tell yes they ran successfully. Then we see the count itself. If you just run console log on count, it only sees those public members. Then if you run the console log on count to JSON, you get this right here, which you'll notice that it shows the undefined object. So if you don't pass something in, it becomes undefined. And then you notice I had John Doe here as a default. So if I hadn't passed in Rudy, then run by still would have been created, but it would have been John Doe. And then lastly, if you run stringify on the toJSON method, you see I call it, it's a little selective snapshot of what you want to see. And the cool part here is you can see what was actually passed in to spec, and then the new current value at that time of what's in those same variables, because you're using them and changing them. And then the current value of count is 2. Let's see, and what else? Did I want to show you? That's pretty good for now. Let me finish the slides quick, and then I'll jump to questions, and we could always go back to the code. Okay, so my current results. My suggestion is what I did was rewrite in the middle of it. Well, maybe the next version of it. I rewrote 1 functional area using the new pattern. Before I did that, I picked 1 utility in a project that I had and rewrote it using the pattern to kind of get used to it, to work out the JS doc, all of that stuff. And it just I liked it so much that I just created a refactor folder and tried to use the new pattern on a new area. And it was going so well, it felt like it was eating my code base, if that makes any sense to you. So I went from that, I had an area that converted files by type via a single dialog page into a proprietary format for a use case in something that I'm working on. And I went from supporting 2 types to supporting 11 types. And then while I was in there, I reduced some friction in the UI at the same time. I ended up adding more layers of data validation and even some custom logic depending on the type. And then I found that I could implement a new type in 2 to 8 hours to production. So if somebody said, can you support this? And I would give me a sample, and then I could start it. I could put it in my personal dev flow and have it in their hands. Short amount of turnaround. So my do next items are to pick another area and do it again, seek some feedback, and then try and get an apples to apples refactor where I'm not causing my own scope creep, like I did with this one. That way I can kind of compare that, finalize the use in my IDE, some testing and packaging considerations, like how does it work when you minimize it and all that. Just general, how does it really perform? It does seem to be more performant, and it does tend to use less code. What else? I think that's it. And before I take questions, you can go to bit.ly class free talk, and that will take you directly to my my GitHub gist, which has the code sample, and then in the comments you'll find a link, a PDF link to this presentation. With that, totally open to questions.
Okay, so we got a couple of commendations. That's great. I didn't see any questions, so
Okay.
I will go ahead and say thank you.